Hi guys, this is a short video on just understanding and recognizing symbols in literature. We are about to start a book that definitely has a strong display of symbols, and we will be trying to recognize and analyze them as we read. So here we go. Make sure my volume's up. Okay, maybe.
Suppose you see an advertisement for an online encyclopedia. The ad features a photograph of a smiling student, triumphantly holding up his diploma. The diploma is being used as a symbol. It represents something more than what it is, a piece of paper. Rather, the diploma stands for a future filled with endless possibilities. Symbols often appear in literature, too. On the screens that follow, you'll learn how to interpret and analyze the symbols you encounter in your reading. In literature, a symbol is a person, place, object, or activity that stands for something beyond itself. A writer's use of symbols is called symbolism. Click these symbols for some examples.
So this first one I'm sure you're mostly familiar with, but we'll go through them. The Statue of Liberty is an instantly recognizable symbol that stands for freedom, American pride, or new opportunities. You may not know that a sunset might often symbolize beauty, peace, or the end of something, since it is the end of an actual day. Sometimes a child can symbolize innocence or playfulness. And guys, remember, this doesn't mean like every time there's a kid in a book that it's like, oh, they're young and playful. It just can. This always, with any literature, it depends how it's being used. The touching of hands can symbolize unity, teamwork, or being in agreement. And a road might symbolize a journey or direction in life.
Some symbols are universal, meaning they communicate meanings that large numbers of people understand. For example, a flag is a universal symbol that stands for patriotism. A dove is a universal symbol that represents peace. What other universal symbols come to mind?
So we've talked a little bit about universal symbols before this video. The other one that we kind of often mentioned was when you hold up your hand and hold up two fingers, it doesn't mean, yay, I'm number two, or that you have to go number two. It's a symbol for peace. Yeah, I said that.
Other symbols are not as instantly recognizable. Rather, they are unique to a specific work of literature. For instance, suppose you are reading a story about a teenager who moves across the country and starts over at a new middle school. At school, the boy feels isolated and unpopular. A talented piano player, the boy throws himself into practicing his music for hours and hours after school every day. In this story, the piano symbolizes an escape from the challenges and loneliness that he faces in his everyday life.
So recognizing symbols and how and why they're used is pretty high level stuff. So if you just heard the narrator talk about this piano and you kind of had your best minion face and are like, what? That's totally okay. You haven't, up to this point in reading, haven't really talked much about symbols or themes. These are higher level concepts that throughout middle school you're going to practice recognizing. And hopefully by the time you leave middle school, you'll be able to recognize them on your own and not just have someone explain them to you.
Interpreting or figuring out symbols can be tricky. As you read any work of literature, look for objects, places, people, or activities that are described in great detail, or that are mentioned often. Then ask yourself, how does this symbol relate to what's happening in the story? What does the symbol mean to the characters? What might this symbol represent? Now, read this passage and look for two symbols. Click each term below to check your answers. Then, try to interpret what these symbols mean by asking yourself the questions above. Cassie was nervous. She was on her way to her first chess tournament. She would be the youngest person competing, and she felt small and helpless. She touched the gold shamrock on her necklace, her good luck charm. As her dad drove, Cassie watched a hawk. Suddenly, a small bird dove at the hawk, forcing it away from its nest. The hawk was 3 times its size, but the smaller bird chased it off. Cassie smiled as she watched the little bird return triumphantly from its attack.
So, in the first paragraph in this passage, hopefully you recognize the universal symbol, and that is the shamrock. So, then you might want to go back and ask yourself, well, how does this relate to what's happening in the story? Well, we've got a character who's on her way to a chess tournament, isn't feeling very confident due to being one of the youngest people, so she's kind of feeling like she needs a little bit of luck. And then in this second passage, there was a unique symbol, and that was, hopefully you noticed, the small bird. And I think in the next slide, they're going to tell you kind of how these relate to what's happening in the story.
Think about the symbols you just identified. A gold shamrock is an instantly recognizable symbol of good luck. The small bird, however, has a meaning that is specific to the story about Cassie. Did you realize that the bird symbolizes Cassie herself? The small bird prevails over the large hawk. Similarly, readers can expect that Cassie, the youngest competitor in the tournament, will defeat her fiercest rivals. By using symbolism, the writer hints at this outcome without directly stating it. Click the image to read another example.
So the questions about how does this relate to the story and the character, those are questions that we're going to have posted in our classroom while we read this novel. And together we'll do a lot of work on recognizing symbols and going through those questions to get to their meaning of them. But here's another example.
Consider a story about a powerful, overworked executive. Deeply unhappy, the woman quits her job and moves to a sunny climate. Suppose the story focuses on the woman's first trip to the beach after making this big change in her life. The writer might describe the woman's old, worn flip-flops. As readers, we come to understand that the flip-flops symbolize an uncomplicated, simple way of life. Use what you've learned about interpreting symbols to complete this practice activity. First, read the passage. What broader meaning might house keys symbolize?
Tough times became a way of life for the Amos family after they lost their home. Wesley Amos wondered how his family could ever get back the secure feeling of having one's own house keys. About a year later, the Amos family built their own home through a program that puts families in need to work. As the builder handed over their house keys, Wesley's heart leaped. The new keys seemed to gleam in the bright sunlight. As his dad opened their front door, Wesley shouted, "Let's get this new home started." So obviously with the picture, we already know that the symbol in this passage are keys, so we need to see what they represent. They can't represent ownership because it's something that they just are. If you think about where the family started and where they ended, you should have gone to new beginnings because they had to work to get it.
Symbols are used in poetry too. Click the image to see an example. The symbol is in boldface type. The warm Afghan, made of yarns of love, covered me, comforted me, held me close. Its soft maternal arms embraced me until I was warm with peace. Analyze the poem. In literal terms, the Afghan is a warm blanket, but it also symbolizes a mother's loving arms.
And hopefully you notice that this is a great example of personification. So when we looked at our poetry this year, we really focused on identifying the types of figurative language, but oftentimes those same pieces of figurative language were symbolizing something as well.
Look for the symbol in the poem on the right. Ask yourself, what object, person, or idea seems to stand for something beyond itself? What is the symbol in this poem?
The quiet day closes in until I'm desperate for company. Searching, I find the perfect one. In an often read book, beloved words speak to me again. So the symbol is not the first one. It's not a day because there is just actually a day coming to an end in this poem. Um, Company, not really symbolic of anything. Desperation is a feeling. Remember, we said a symbol is an object, place, or thing. So that leaves us with a book.
In literature, a symbol is a person, place, object, or activity that stands for something beyond itself. Writers use symbols to communicate big ideas about life. A universal symbol is one that is widely known and easily recognized by many people. Not all symbols are universal, though. Symbols can also be unique to a particular work of literature. To identify and interpret symbols, look for objects, places, people, or activities that are described in great detail. Then ask yourself, what might this symbol represent?
So hopefully that gets you some background knowledge on recognizing symbols in literature. And we'll be doing this in our new novel.